This is another Ask Me Anything session with New York Times bestselling author Jerry Jenkins. I'm your host, David Loy. Thanks for being with us. Jerry, welcome in. How are you today?
I'm doing well. This should be fun. I feel like a non-techie today. I'm going to hang my phone up so it doesn't bother us. But I'm doing great and looking forward to this. This should be fun.
I'm looking forward to it as well. You know, last time you and I did this, which was, gosh, a month and a half ago, something like that, the response was great. People loved just having that immediate and live access to you. And so if you're with us right now, I know people are still jumping into the room. Jerry's excited to answer your questions. So just like we did last time, type your questions into the chat. I believe we're on subscriber chat only. So if you haven't subscribed, this is a great chance for you to subscribe to Jerry's YouTube channel. And Jerry, I don't know if you saw this, but we are right on the line of 150,000 subscribers. And so what my goal is tonight is to push you over that marker of 150,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're with us right now, help us out. Click subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Click the thumbs up button as well. That helps out Jerry's channel a ton. And Jerry, it'd be pretty cool to cross that 150,000 mark tonight, wouldn't it?
I'd love it. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be terrific. All right. Well, we said this is a Q&A session and questions are already coming in. So let me go ahead and click the first one. Well, that's not a question. That one just says Jerry is awesome. You know what, Keegan? I agree. Jerry is awesome. That's exciting. I clicked the wrong one though, Jerry. Let me put a different one up here. This is from Psycho 9, I believe, is how we're going to refer to this person. Any tips for how to use punctuation dialogue in your story correctly?
Yeah, the best thing to do there is to read dozens and dozens of books in your genre and just see how it's done. It's pretty standard stuff. You know, sometimes we wonder, do we put the quote marks after the punctuation or before, that type of thing. If you're reading a lot, and anybody who wants to write should be a voracious reader, as I always say, you know, readers are writers, good readers are good writers. Great readers can be great writers. So read a lot and copy what the successful people do in traditionally published books. And by that, I mean books where the publisher pays you rather than the other way around. I hear from a lot of people who pay to be printed, and whatever, you know, you write and send into in essence, self-publishing firm, they'll print it if you send the check, and they don't care if you've done the punctuation correctly or not. Some do. I have to say there are some good self-publishing companies out there. You have to be very careful. But if you want to see how it's done correctly, you know, read lots of traditionally published books and see how they do it.
Thanks for that question to kick off the session. Lots of folks jumping in here with us, Jerry. Let me remind everybody, it's just another Q&A session. If you have subscribed to the channel, then we'd love to have your question for Jerry tonight. We're going to spend the next the rest of the hour, really, answering questions that you have for Jerry about writing. So let's get to the next one. If I can get this on to the screen. This is from Wesley. Wesley says, I'm a teen writer. Any tips to finally sit down and get past my first chapter? Jerry, you were a teen writer once. What's your advice for Wesley?
Yeah, Wesley, my guess is that one of your issues might be writer's fear. You might fear failure. You might fear finishing because, you know, people will then read it and judge you. There are a lot of writing coaches that'll tell you don't take it personally because they're not judging you. They're just judging your writing, which I think is kind of a crock because I've been doing this for half a century, and that is me on the page. That is personal. If somebody rejects my writing, they're rejecting me, and I can give myself all the happy talk I want, but the fact is that hurts. So you do need to be brave. You need to overcome that fear. And I have overcome writer's fear by embracing it. That sounds kind of strange, but rather than say, you know, again, give yourself happy talk and say, I should be strong and courageous and all that stuff, you have reasons to be afraid. If you fear that the competition is too great, it is. If you fear that you may not be good enough, you may not be. If you fear criticism or input, you're going to get it. And so I say, embrace that fear and say, I have reasons to be afraid, but don't let that paralyze you and make you stop. Use that fear to motivate yourself to say, look, I have reasons to be afraid, so that means I need to do my absolute best work every time. I still have to do that. After 200 plus books, I sit down to write a new one and I think, is somebody going to find out now that I'm a fraud? That I really shouldn't have ever thought I could do this? Am I going to get rejected? Is the competition too great? And I say, yeah, all those things are potentially true. I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to have it motivate me to do my absolute best work every time. I'm not going to mail this in, even though maybe I could after all this time and experience and success I've had. Let that fear motivate you to do hard work. It's hard work that makes the difference.
Thanks for that question, Wesley. Glad you're here, and glad so many of you are already active in the chat. Love to hear or see all these questions and comments, conversations going back and forth. If you haven't participated yet, would love to have you jump into the chat as well if you're with us. Let's go to Space Beast. You joined us last time. Good to see you're here with us again. I think you did, at least. But Jerry, here's the question. I'm having trouble when to know what I can send in to get copyrighted. What is considered finished and ready to copyright? You hear a lot of these kind of questions, Jerry. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I do hear these. And the fact is that anything you write is automatically copyrighted. If you put your name on it, you own it, and it's copyrighted. Now, if you're going to get it published, the publisher will copyright it officially for you in Washington and get all that kind of work done. But some people worry that they need to have something copyrighted so nobody will steal it. That happens so infrequently, I wouldn't even worry about it. Worry more about getting your stuff published than getting it stolen, because people aren't stealing, your stuff. I can count on the fingers of one hand the cases I've heard of somebody trying to steal something. And there's an easy way to protect yourself from that. We do everything electronically nowadays, and we're submitting things, transmitting them over the Ethernet and everything. But I would urge you to print out a copy of what you write and send it to yourself as registered mail. And when it comes, don't open it. It'll have a postmark on it, and it'll tell the date. And if anybody ever writes something that you think is stolen from you, you can prove that you owned it first because you've got it in that sealed envelope with the date on it. That's when you open it or have somebody open it and say, I had it first. But you can even put your own copyright notice on a page because, as I say, it's automatically copyrighted when you write it. And then let a publisher do all the official work later if you get published.
Thanks for that question. For those of you who might not know some of the credentials that Jerry brings to the table, he won't talk about them, but that's why I'm here. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about some of the things that Jerry's done. Over 200 books that he has written and published in his career, nearly 50 years. Is that right, Jerry, of your career?
Yeah, we're coming up on 50. It'll be 50. I think the first book came out in 73 or 74. So we're getting close.
Almost 50 years, over 200 books, like I said, and well over 73 million copies of those books have sold and counting. And the counting continues month after month. It's always a pleasure to see those numbers keep coming in year after year. Jerry, let's get to another question that came in. Lots of questions coming in. We're going to get to as many as we can in this hour. But let's go to Book Nerd 38. Here's your question for Jerry. Any advice for a writing routine when you have a newborn on the way?
You better be writing fast, because once the newborn gets there, you may not be doing some writing for a few months. I always like to make the point that I never sacrificed my family on the altar of my writing dreams. There are things more important than writing. That may sound strange coming from somebody who really has only that one gift. I'm not trying to sound falsely modest, but I'm not multi-gifted. I have one gift and I feel obligated to exercise it. But there are times when you should not be writing, and you probably shouldn't be trying to write with a newborn in the house for a few weeks or months, unless you can find a place to get away and have somebody else watch the baby. It's important that you realize what your priorities are. Your time will come when you get to write, and then you can write without guilt. I'm a morning person, but when my wife and I were raising 3 young sons, I couldn't, I had a full-time job too. So I was working during the day. When I got home, I wanted to prove to my family that they were my top priority. And so I didn't write at that time. I waited until everybody was in bed, and then I wrote for maybe 2 or 3 hours each night. It was not easy, but it just showed how much I wanted to fulfill that dream. How badly do you want this? So, if it happens that you have to take a break from writing for a while, feel free to do it, so that when you do find the time, and you won't find it, you'll have to create the time. I shouldn't say find the time. I often teach this, that the time you create will show you how badly you want to fulfill your dream. Once you do that, it becomes a sacred time that you need to invest, and you can write without guilt because you're not making your family a second priority. So good luck with that, and don't feel guilty if you have to take time away from your writing for a while.
Great advice there, Jerry. Thanks for that question. Let's go now to R. Just asked this question in the chat. How do I know my writing is good? How did you know, Jerry, that your writing was good at first?
I like this question because too often I see writing from beginners who are convinced their writing is good. And the odds are it's not, because you're a beginner. You need to allow yourself to be bad at this at first, just the way you did when you were learning to ride a bike or bake a cake or learn to dance. Allow yourself to be bad. You need to get a lot of cliches out of your system. You need people to read and give you input. The only way to know if your writing is good is to show it to other people and see if they want to keep reading. Now, some of these people will just be typical readers. There's nothing wrong with using typical readers as critics, even though they're not professionals. Maybe they can't teach you all the ins and outs and all the tricks that I've learned over the years, like somebody in a critique group could, or another writing professional. But it's good to get input from them because they're typical readers, and you want to know how a typical reader would react. But you also want to get with people who've been where you've been, who've succeeded where you'd like to succeed. Get your writing in front of a critique group that has people in it who have succeeded and have published, and listen carefully. Do a lot more listening than you do talking. It's good to come at this with some humility. People who think their writing is good and don't want any input are usually not going to ever make it. I can almost always tell with new writers when I teach online. If they send me something and I give my honest input, I try not to be too brutal, but I think I owe it to them to be honest. So I tell them the truth about the writing, what needs to change to make it work. If they get their back up and they think, hey, my mom thinks this is great, or my uncle loved my writing, or my teacher loved my writing, I'm not real optimistic about their future. They need to be able to take input from people who know. If there's somebody inside the business who gives you, some real input, see how much of that you can follow. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything or even do everything that an editor or a coach tells you. Take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. But if you're having trouble getting published, you might want to really listen carefully to that input and follow it as closely as you can. So that's how you'll know. Get it out there. And it takes some bravado to send your stuff out and get that kind of input, but it's important for your career.
Absolutely. Terry, here's your question next for Jerry. What is your favorite book, and what is the favorite book that you have written? So a couple of questions there. What comes to mind when you hear that, Jerry?
My favorite book ever is called All Over But the Shoutin' by Rick Bragg, B-R-A-G-G. This is a masterpiece. It was written by a New York Times columnist who was raised in the Deep South by a single mother. He and his brothers were raised that way. He's absolutely a poet. I mean, I read his book at least once a year. I can make my family a little crazy by quoting them from that book all the time. Just fantastic. I recommend it to everybody. And it's a memoir of his growing up years, and just beautiful. My favorite book that I've ever written is called Riven, R-I-V-E-N. And it's a novel that I'd wanted to write for many years, but I was in the middle of other contracts and series. I finally talked a publisher into letting me take a shot at it. And I'd been thinking about it for so long, it just gushed from me. I was happy with the way it came out. I was happy with the product they put together. It's not one of my best sellers necessarily, but it's the best work I think I've done and the best story I've ever told. And I was just happy with it. And it's also my longest novel. So even if you don't like it, it makes a good doorstop. So there's some positives there regardless.
Oh, that's great. Lots of questions coming in, way more, Jerry, than we're going to have time to get to, but we're going to keep rifling through these as much as possible. Let's go to Megan now. Megan says, how do you know that you're finished with the editing process?
That's a really good question, Megan. Especially these days when we have so much technology that allows us to keep changing things so easily. I started my career, more than 50 years ago, writing in magazines and newspapers before I started writing books on a manual typewriter. You make a mistake on a manual typewriter, you're taking that sheet out of there and putting a new one in. Now we can move copy around, we can change things ad infinitum. The tricky thing, the thing that makes us authors is making this decision. Have I stopped making it better and am I only making it different? We can make it different till the cows come home. I mean, I'm writing, I'm in the final stretch of a novel that I'm writing this right now. I've got about a week to go on this thing. And I could keep changing things all the time, every day, for weeks if I wanted to. But I need to get to the point where I recognize which version I would read and hope there's lots of other people out there like me, and stop. Once you've come up with a version or a scene that you like, you've made some changes, you've made it work, be able to make that decision. I can make it different, but I can't make it better than this, and then go with it. Trust your gut. It's important for writers to trust their gut. You're really writing for yourself in the end. People are always talking about imagining your audience. Sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes I can do it. A lot of times I can't. And so I just imagine myself reading this and saying, would I turn the page? Would this keep my interest? Is this the best version? Is this the best word? And then I trust my gut and go with it. So that's what I would urge you to do.
Yeah, great question there, Megan. If you're with us right now and you haven't done this yet, I would love to hear where you're joining us from. If you respond and let us know where you are right now, I'll go through and give a shout out to everybody here in just a little while, but just curious to know where the YouTube subscribers are joining us from today, Jerry, and lots of them are here with us. Lots of great questions. Here's a quick question for you, Jerry, as those people are typing in some responses. Classic Montana says, are short stories profitable?
Probably not. If you're a big name writer and you can get a short story in a huge publication like the New Yorker or a story in Reader's Digest, something like that, it can be profitable for some. I do say, though, it's a great training experience. Write short stories, try to sell them to regional magazines and that type of thing. While there may not be a whole lot of money in it, it's good experience, and you might be discovered there too by agents who read those kind of magazines and e-zines and that type of thing. Plus, writing short is a way to get a lot of training in without having to write an entire book. In fact, I think a mistake is to try to start your career with a book. A book is where you arrive. It's not where you start. Starting your career with a book is sort of like a 5-year-old going to graduate school instead of kindergarten. There are things, the basic things you need to learn and grow into. So do that. I like to write short stories. I don't write too many anymore. But back in the day, I wrote a bunch and put them together in a book, and it did okay. I wouldn't, it's not one of my best sellers. I wouldn't say it was terribly profitable, but it was fun to do. I had some loyal readers of it. But I would urge you to try that because it's good training, and while you might not get rich from it, it could be a good boost to your career.
Another great question. They're coming in here, Jerry. Let's go to Sebastian's next. do you believe in inspiration or do you apply a good habit? And Jerry, I'll add on to this, I guess. Is it a combination of both when you're sitting down to write?
Um, I can't wait for inspiration. As I mentioned, this is my only gift. This is the only thing I do. I hope I don't get off screen too far here, but I'm going to grab a paperweight over here. And I don't know if I can even show it on screen. Is that showing? It's probably
I
backwards.
can't read it.
There it is. Can you read
No,
that, David?
it is backwards.
All right. It says, the ultimate inspiration is the deadline. I write on contract. I don't write books anymore where I'm hoping they'll sell and hoping I can get a publisher. I arrange that in advance. My agent works on that. And so I'm writing a book under contract. If I don't get it in the time that contract says, I don't get my money. So that's all the inspiration I need. Most writers, though, are creatives. We're inspired all the time. I have more ideas than I have years left to write. And so I can't sit around. I'm not waiting for inspiration. I've got the ideas. I have a job to do. And, the only way to write a book is with your seat in the chair. So keep it there. If you don't feel like writing that day, I know what it feels like to sometimes wake up and not feel like you want to do anything less than put words on a page. But there's research to do. There's emails to catch up on. There's things that people you can interview. There's always something to do. And so treat it as a job and do it. No other profession is allowed this conceit of what we call writer's block. Try, no matter whatever your job is, try calling your boss some morning and say, I can't come in today. I have worker's block. They will laugh you off the phone. They may tell you never come in again. So we shouldn't use that in the writing profession either. We have a job. Let's do the job.
Great advice. Thanks for that question. Cooper, here's your question for Jerry. Hey, Jerry, what's the best way to write action sequences that flow smoothly with the story? And then thank you for all your great advice on writing.
Well, thanks for your kind comments. I could do a whole seminar on writing action scenes. Let me break it down really quickly. There used to be a thing, I'm not sure how they do it today with the new fancy cameras, but in the old days, when they shot movies, they were actually literally running film through the camera. And to show something in slow motion, ironically, the camera runs faster because it's running more film through while the action is taking place, so that when they show it on the screen at normal speed, it takes more time to run all that film past the projector. In essence, think of that when you're writing action scenes. A lot of stuff happens in action scenes that takes a second or less. Somebody gets punched in the face, or a car flips over, or a shot rings out, that type of thing. To get that to read sort of in slow motion so the reader gets it and sees what's happening, even though it's flying by, run more film through your camera. Use more words to do that. I think it's good to vary, too, your sentence length. Some sentences will sound choppy and clipped. Others will, carry on. They shouldn't sound like run-on sentences, but they should do whatever they need to do. The important thing is you need to learn all the details of how not to over-explain. Don't tell what everybody's doing with each hand and each leg and that type of thing. I teach a lot of that online. And so, if you want to check us out at jerryjenkins.com and see, we've got free stuff, tips and blogs and things to read. You don't have to pay to get that stuff, and all the way up to courses you can buy. But we teach a lot of that, and it takes a long time. There's a lot of training there. But this is a good question, and it's something you do want to think about. You want that action scene to fit with the story, and you also want it to move. And not, obviously not slow the reader down. Look at your entire story sort of as a roller coaster. And some people try to write at breakneck speed from page 1 to the end. That wears people out. You might have a dramatic action scene, but then you also need those scenes where that roller coaster is clicking its way up to the peak, to the apex. Now, that may sound slow, but all that clacking you hear, nobody's jumping off, are they? The tension is rising. They know that when they hit that peak, they're going to come sliding down and do flips and whirls and all kinds of things. That's the way a book should read. Give us time to breathe, but keep the tension going.
All right, let's go now. Actually, let me remind everybody, if you haven't done so yet, type into the chat box where you are. And after this next question, I'm going to rifle through those, give everyone who participates a personal shout out. So if you haven't done so yet, do it right now. While they're doing that, Jerry, let me put the next question up on the screen. This is from Aqua Fanatics. This is, hey, Jerry, I'm thinking about publishing my book through a website with a subscription-based access to readers and releasing chapters every week. Any thoughts on that?
That's an interesting way to do it. And, Charles Dickens actually wrote some of his novels, not obviously online, but would send them as chapters to newspapers and would ship, pamphlet type things overseas, and people would wait for those things. It's a way to do it. Stephen King has done this, writing in pieces and having people come back to those. The only thing I would urge you to do is not to pay to have this done. If you're paying, I like the fact that people are paying to read it. That's great. That's what we're trying to make a living doing this type of thing. There are places that will let you do this and have you pay for it. And I would like to see you exhaust your efforts to be traditionally published first. You can always resort to self-publishing and paying to be printed or published. But just be careful that somebody's not taking advantage of you and saying, we'll put this out and let people buy it, but you have to pay to put it out there. I may be reading something into this that wasn't there, but just a caution for that.
Absolutely. Jerry, let me take a minute to say hello to a few people. Space Beast is in Brooklyn. Megan is in Bloomer, Wisconsin. The Real Vicky in Texas. Princess joins us from New Zealand. Shar is with us in North Carolina. Christine in Colorado. Cooper in my hometown from Dallas, Texas. Cooper, welcome. We are kindred spirits. Keegan in Ontario, Canada. Crimson from England. Donna, all the way from the top of Maine. So welcome in, Donna. Glad you're joining us live for this Q&A with Jerry Jenkins. Billy in Sweden. MVS is in Liverpool, UK. Carolyn is also in Brooklyn. Maybe Carolyn and Space Beast need to get a little writers group going together. Glenn is in Southern California. Rhonda in Mason, Ohio. BJA in Tasmania. Beluda joins us from Egypt. Welcome in, Beluda. Horunka joins us from Romania. Jennifer's in Florida. Similar frequencies in Northern Texas. Terry is in Greenville, Texas, not too far from Dallas. Psycho Nines in California. Melanie in Dallas. Caden in San Francisco. Alex in Stockton-on-Tees, England. Joy Brown in Austin, Texas. Jerry, there's actually a lot more of these, so I'm not going to get them all on this time, but I will stop there and put another question up and then come back and read some more in just a minute. Let's put Shan Ray, I believe. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, but here's the question, Jerry. When writing a fantasy novel in another world setting, should I start with a prologue telling the world's history?
Actually, I think you shouldn't. Readers catch on to things much more quickly than we sometimes give them credit for. Give your reader credit. I would start right in the middle of something happening in this world. And as you mention it and as you layer in details about that world, they're going to catch on what it's like there, what the buildings look like, what the terrain is, what the temperatures are, that type of thing. What kind of technology they use. It'll all come out in the story, not as a separate element, but layered in. And then the backstory should come out too. That can come out in dialogue, and it should come out the way it does in real life. Somebody might mention what happened certain late years ago in another planet or something like that, and we're getting the picture that this is a fantasy world, and it does have a history, and what is that history? There's a great book that I recommend. It's called Hooked, Hooked. It's by Les Edgerton. He's a great novelist, but he talks about how to capture your readers from the beginning and to avoid the temptation of dumping a whole bunch of information in a prologue to give the backstory of the setting or the times or the whole, even the whole world. Give the reader credit, let them catch on as the story goes. I think that's a much more fun way to discover a story. And we always have to think of the reader as part of the transaction. I don't simply want to be an author who's telling them everything. I want them to deduce things. For the same reason that we teach show, don't tell. In other words, I don't say Susan was cold. I say Susan stepped outside and raised her collar and tightened her scarf and shoved her hands deep into her pockets and turned her face away from the biting wind. That way, I'm not telling you she's cold. You're deducing she's cold from what I'm showing you. Same thing with your opener and with your backstory about the entire planet or whatever world you've got there. It's a fun way to do it. It's a challenge, but I think that'll pay off for you in the end.
Jerry, let me give a few more shout outs here. Anna in Quincy, Washington. R is with us from Sweden. Classic, who asked a question earlier. Tupelo, Mississippi. Natural Film from Florida is with us. Glad you're a part of this session. Let's go on to, I can't scroll fast enough. Let's see. We already did Toronto from All Time Just. Bolivia joins us as well. I think that country count is now at 9, Jerry, if I'm keeping it correct, maybe 10. Christina's in NYC. Rod joins us from Kentucky. Gordana from Italy. Keep that country count escalating. The Footy Dave in Scotland. Glad you're here, Dave. The other comic guy, Montana. Emily from California. Steph R. Mort from Denmark, another country being represented. Dominican Republic. Jeremy joins us from the Dominican. I've been to the Dominican a couple times. It's a beautiful place. Saskatchewan, Canada in the house with Kate. Let's see, Northern Mexico. Mino Ramada joins us from Mexico. Sage joins us from Colorado Springs. Jerry, you've been to Colorado Springs 1 or 2 times before, maybe even currently in Colorado Springs. We'll see. Prince is in Zambia. Golly, the country is just all over the place. Iran is with us. The country of Iran represented by Rose. Rose, glad you're here. Jesus Garcia from Miami. Humpty Dumpty in Newcastle, England. Jerry, I'll resume the shout outs in a minute. Let's get to another question. This one's from Shar. Shar says, where should I start if not with a book? You mentioned this earlier, Jerry, but if somebody is just getting started, where do they start if it's not with a book?
Yeah, and before I answer that, I like that question. Before I answer that, I guess I'm showing my age, but this is a miracle to me. I mean, when I was growing up, sometimes in Sunday school, we would write to the missionaries that we knew that were sent out from our church. You'd write it on onion skin paper so that it would be cheap to send it. It would take about 6 weeks for it to get to whatever country in the world, another 6 weeks for them to write back. And here we are. I mean, my grandkids, of course, they do this every day, and we're playing games or whatever they're doing. They're interacting with people all over the world, all at the same time, immediately. And here we're doing that here. It's just, to me, it boggles the mind. I find it miraculous, and I love the fact that everybody's here. And I hear a lot of countries there that I've been to as well. Romania is one that is especially close to my heart. So where should you start if not with a book? You just want to start with shorter stuff. Try to write something for maybe a company publication, a church publication, a local community publication. Write articles, write stories. And then, you can find market guides. If you happen to write in the inspirational market, which is where most of my stuff is published, there's the Christian Writers Market Guide. If you're writing for the general market, there's Writers Market that's put out by Writer's Digest. They list all the publications, all the book publishing companies, agents that you might want to employ if you get that far in your career, and then all kinds of tips in those books too on where to go, how to start, things to do. So start short, start small, learn the business, learn how to work with an editor, learn how to be edited, how to be critiqued, and you'll soon be on your way to writing a book if that's your dream.
Jerry, I'm going to do something they call a tease, I believe, in the radio business, which is there's so many people here, so many questions we're not going to be able to get to. But if you're here with us and you want a guaranteed answer to your question from Jerry Jenkins, he actually has a way for you to do that. I'll tell you about it in just a little while. He answers questions from people consistently every single month through a special offering that we'll talk about in a minute. But if we don't get to your question, I've got a way to make sure, a guaranteed way to make sure that you get your question answered by Jerry Jenkins fairly quickly, actually. So stick around. I'll give you some more details in a minute. In the meantime, Jerry, let me say a couple more hellos and then another question. I can't remember if I said this one earlier, but Trevor is with us from Saudi Arabia. So welcome in, Trevor. Glad you're here. Miwi is in Honduras. Edwin in Melbourne, Australia. Glastonbury, Connecticut is represented by Blazing Swordsman. Rogue Maximus is here from Brazil. Haven't seen Brazil in the chat yet, so welcome in. Glad you're a part of our live session here. There's more, and I can't, the chat is just, I got to get better at dealing with the massive amounts of chat, Jerry. But while I still work on improving myself, let's go to Kate's question. Kate now says, is there a best practice on how to actually put words on paper? I use speech to text to write. Is this strange?
Yeah, that's really strange. How do you do that? No, you're not alone in that, Kate. I have tried that. I got to the point where I was using some speech to text for emails and things, just trying to get a lot of my business stuff taken care of quickly. I find that I think better when I'm keyboarding. Some people write things out still with a pen or pencil on paper and then keyboard it in. Eventually, when you submit it to publications or e-zines or book publishers, it needs to be in electronic form so you can transmit it. So somebody's going to have to keyboard that and get it done. Speech to text is one way, and it's getting better and better. I can remember when those programs first came out, they were pretty rudimentary, and you'd have to change about half the stuff that you say. You'd speak it, and it would catch about half and screw up the rest, and you have to fix it. It was still fun to play with because it was technology, and we're learning this stuff. Nowadays, there are speech-to-text programs that catch about 90% of what you say. And you have to go back through it and clean it up anyway, because what you say is not necessarily what you'd write. So you're going to be going through, and then you just catch those few little errors. So most people that I know in the business are writing their books on a keyboard, on a computer, and in Word, because that Word is the sort of currency of publishing. You're transmitting your Word documents to publishers to be published. But there's no rule about that. Whatever works best for you. The great novelist Pat Conroy, who's been gone for a few years now, he felt that he thought at the same pace that he wrote with a fountain pen on a yellow pad. He wrote some really beautiful prose, and it came to him at that sort of cadence. If he was typing, he said that he felt like he needed to go faster, and it didn't work. And if he used a pencil, for some reason that didn't quite work for him either. Just the idea of writing in cursive and having it flow from his pen was the same pace that he thought about the phraseology. And then I don't remember if he keyboarded himself after that, or if he had somebody do it, but then he would do his machinations with it after that. I do my editing and rewriting online on screen as well, which really works great for me. As I mentioned, I started with a typewriter back in the ancient days when rainbows were black and white. But I've tried to stay with the technology all the way. I had a computer as early as the early 1980s, and now I try to have the best I can just to try to make it the most streamlined possible. So whatever works for you will work.
All right, a few more shout outs here. Brandon joins us from Idaho. The Violet Wolf is in Texas. Yami joins us from Minnesota. Kingston, Jamaica in the room with Leanne Johnson. Leanne, welcome in. Zambia with Prince. I think I said that one earlier. Hannah in the UK. Melos from California. A few more here, Jerry. Remington in Southern Oregon. And let's do one more, and then we'll get to another question. Kentucky. PBEA joins us from Kentucky. Glad you're here. Let's go to a question from BJA, actually. I don't think we've taken one of these questions from you before. Let's see what Jerry has to say. How can you trust a critique group not to steal your ideas, especially when no one else has written on your topic? The topic is medieval historical fiction of real but obscure events. Any thoughts here, Jerry?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you may not have been with us at the beginning, but I rarely see incidents of people actually stealing other people's ideas. It's so rare, and your topic is so esoteric: medieval historical fiction of real but obscure events. You may have the monopoly on that. That sounds like a pretty interesting angle, and you find a publisher that's interested in the same. You've got a good shot here. I really think, and I've been in lots of critique groups. I'm in several online, and I'm in one that I go to live every 2 weeks. Most people, in fact, all the people that I interact with on those are such good people. I mean, the writing community is a good one, and people have your best interest at heart as well as their own. Nobody's stealing anything, and if they were, they'd be gone so fast. It's sort of like, it reminds me of the people in the Diamond District in New York. They do things often with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gems on a handshake or on something written on a napkin. And, if anybody tries to steal something, they'd be gone from the business forever. And I feel that same way about writers. I mean, we're all trying to get published, and we're all trying to encourage other people to get published. I really wouldn't worry about the piracy so much. And you can Google, I think I've got a blog, Jerry Jenkins on literary piracy. I'm not sure if that's the exact, but I think you'll be able to find it. And I have some experts there talking about how rare it is and how you really shouldn't let that bother you, and just do your thing.
Couple more shout outs here, Jerry. I think I've finally gotten through the list. Matrix joins us from Poland. Add another one to the country list. And then Robert joins us in Michigan. So thanks to everybody who has participated in that. If I missed you, hit me up in the chat again, and I'll make sure to read through some more at the end. But we've got just over 15 minutes left of Q&A with Jerry Jenkins. I want to make sure we do tell you about a cool opportunity Jerry's offering this week. But before we do that, Jerry, I want to get to a question that I feel like it's one that you hear a lot. I wonder if you get tired of answering this, but I know that so many writers go through it. So writers are great is the person who asked it. I'll put it up on the screen right now. Get your thoughts. Jerry, what do you do when you have writer's block?
Yeah, I tell myself that writer's block is a myth. Now, I know that sounds strange, and especially if you're experiencing it right now, you're saying, how can you say that? I know the feeling. I know that feeling of not wanting to write on a certain day. But as I've said, this is the only profession that allows that conceit. You can't, no matter what job you have, you can't call your boss and say, I have worker's block. It's just not allowed. You don't get to do that. You still have to come to work. If you just simply can't put words on the page that day, do something else. Research, take a walk, think, finish up the business side of your life, the emails and that type of thing. But at some point, you're going to have to put words on the page. That's the only way to be a writer. How badly do you want this? Yeah, it involves some self-talk, but the one thing you'll guarantee, if you don't put words on a page, you will never succeed as a writer. That's guaranteed. You may worry about succeeding. That may be what's blocking you, what's keeping you, that writer's fear. You're guaranteeing it by not working. So force yourself to do it, and then find out. Get your writing out there. See what people think about it. It could wind up to be a dream career for you, the way it has for me. And maybe your goal is to just write one book. You don't need to write 200, but you want to write one. You can only do that if you get words on the page. And I believe you can do it.
All right, let's keep rifling through these, Jerry. So many good ones to get to. Humpty Dumpty has this question: any tips on describing faces? Not just how to actually describe them, but how to imply emotion through it.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't describe faces. How's that for some writing advice? I don't describe my characters very thoroughly. I want the reader to see who they want to see. Now, if my main character needs to be a man, I'd say that he's a man. If he needs to be athletic, I show him doing something athletic. If he needs to be tall, I show somebody saying something about his height, or his dark hair, or maybe he has, piercing blue eyes. Somebody says that. But I don't need the shape of his nose, the cleft of the chin, the evenness of the teeth, the cheekbones. If you want to see him as Brad Pitt, fine. If you want to see him as Ben Affleck, fine. Let 1,000 readers see your character however they want to, as long as they get the basic. You don't want them to have no idea whether the person's black or white or Asian or, what ethnicity, or whether they're short or tall. We need that. But we don't need all this description. And usually the description is a separate element, which really slows the story down. I don't want to spend a half a page talking about how tall my character is. I just want somebody to say, I can't reach that. Can you get it for me? And he does it. Now we get the picture. He's taller than the person he's talking to. That's all we need. Let the reader deduce. Give them credit to figure things out, and let them have an experience in realizing the story and not just having everything told to them.
It's great advice, Jerry, and lots of folks are chiming in, agreeing that was great advice. So glad we were able to get to that question. Let's do Nespresso, please. Here's a question: if you're writing 500 words a day, when you finish a draft and are editing, do you then start drafting a different story in order to keep the words going? Or do you suspend the 500 words until you're done?
Let me read through that again and see if I follow it. You're writing 500 words a day, finish a draft and you're editing. Do you then start drafting a different story to keep the words going? Let me tell you how I work. I write a certain number of pages per day. And the first thing I do every writing day is I do a heavy edit and rewrite of everything I've written the day before. Now, those are two separate functions: rough draft writing versus revision and editing. They take two different approaches completely. When I'm writing the rough draft, I don't worry about misspellings, redundancies, cliches, anything like that. I just get my story down or my nonfiction idea down. I just want those words on the page. And when I'm tempted to fix them as I go, I talk myself out of it, because if I start doing that, I'll never get anything done. It'll be glacial, my speed. So I'm writing now, I'm editing tomorrow. I switch hats. I'll put my perfectionist cap on, tell my inner critic he can have full reign to criticize everything I'm doing and want to change. I want to be happy with every word when I'm rewriting and revising. When I'm done with that, that catapults me into that day's rough draft writing. So I take that perfectionist cap off, tell that inner critic to shut up, and start getting words on the page again. I don't think I would start writing another story at that point. There were times in my career when I was averaging 4 books a year where I might write a children's book, write on a children's book in the morning and write on a nonfiction book in the afternoon. I had a little bit more bandwidth back then, and I don't try to do that anymore. I try to stick with one thing till it's done, and I think that would work for you too. Do your writing, separate your editing. Some people like to write a whole chapter before they rewrite. Some people like to write a whole book before they they do their revision. I don't recommend that, because if you find something a quarter of the way through your manuscript that has to be changed, it might change everything from then on. If you're doing what I do, where you do it in blocks, it doesn't have to be every day, but every few days you're rewriting and revising, you can catch errors that won't have you have to write the entire rest of the manuscript again.
Sorry, Jerry, just reading through all of these comments and conversations going on. It's great to see the writing community come together on an event like this and get great feedback. But Jerry, we've got time for more questions. I do want to take just a moment, because the last time we did a YouTube Live, it was just nothing but questions. And I know you love doing that, and we're probably going to do that again at some point. But one of the things that you're offering this week is a way to make sure that people get guaranteed answers to their questions from you on a consistent basis. It's something that you created 7 years ago. It's called the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. And if you're with us right now and we haven't gotten to your question yet, stick with us. We might get to it in a minute, but I want to make sure everybody's aware, Jerry, of what the Writers Guild is and how they can get access to it. So I just put the link in the chat for everyone to be able to click on that. But Jerry, if you can, just quickly tell us why you created something like the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild in the first place.
Well, when I was a teenager, I was about 15, and a friend who knew I wanted to be a writer introduced me to a successful author that I was a reader of his. And so I was thrilled just to get to meet him. But he was so kind to me. He let that greeting extend for about an hour and talked shop with me like I was a colleague, and was really encouraging. And I remember thinking clearly that day, if I ever have a modicum of success as an author, as a writer, I want to be as kind to new writers as he was to me. And I have seen more than a modicum of success in my career. I feel privileged to be able to pay it forward. I want to help new writers. I know I'm not going to be here forever, and a lot of my colleagues are my same age. We're passing from the scene eventually. We need new writers. And I want to help people do that. It makes me feel good to do it. And so, we started the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild, and thousands of people have joined over the years, and hopefully have benefited.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing several new members and pre-existing members in the chat with us right now. So glad many of you are with us right now. But let me just tell you what I was talking about earlier when I did that tease. If you're with us and love getting questions answered by Jerry, part of what the Writers Guild is it includes a monthly office hours session that is specifically dedicated to Writers Guild members, where it's nothing but Q&A. He does that live. We record it, obviously, just like this session's being recorded, and it's archived for members. But then the kicker is, if he doesn't get to your question live during a session like that, we have a feature called the Ask Jerry feature inside the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. All you have to do is go click that feature, type in your question, and I like to say within 2 or 3 days, Jerry will give you an answer. What the truth is he'll actually give you an answer much faster than that normally, because Jerry, you really love jumping in there and answering questions, don't you?
I do. I check that every day. And, I'm not a writing coach who used to be an author. I'm still in the game. And so I'm writing almost every day. And I'm sure I've got a little ADHD too. And so when I need a break, just needed to get away from the chapter for a minute or two, I'll just check the Ask Jerry feature. And if there's a question there, I'll answer it right then. And so usually people are getting answers same day. Hardly ever goes 24 hours or 48 hours unless I'm on the road or something. But I really do enjoy that, and it's fun, and I get great questions too. But the office hours session is just like this one. People log in and ask questions live, and then we've got that backup for people that didn't get their question answered.
That's exactly right. And Jerry, the answering of questions is really just a small sample of everything that's available inside the Writers Guild. Behind the scenes, we call it the Jerry Jenkins brain on writing. We've extracted everything you know about writing and put it into, over the last 7 years, this catalog of material called the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. So I just put the link in there again. Would love for y'all to check it out. It's only available, registration's only available until this Friday night, October 28th at midnight. So You've got a couple days left. We'd love to have new members jump in. And that's all we'll say about that for now, Jerry. Let's get to a couple questions, though, before our time runs out. Muhammad joins us from Egypt and asks you the following. Muhammad says, I have 4 unfinished novels. Since 2015, I start writing with a good setting, but then I get busy in other things without finishing the writing. Do you have any advice for someone in Muhammad's situation?
I do. You're a creative and you've got lots of ideas, and that's very typical of a lot of us writers. I usually have 6 or 8 book ideas at a time. And when I'm writing one, I think of others. And so I jot a note and put it on that list. But I think it's really important to take your list of projects and get away somewhere for a couple hours or half a day if you can, and simply prioritize those and ask yourself, if I had to choose one of these to take with me to a deserted island and I can't leave until I'm finished, which one would it be? Which one are you the most passionate about? And which one will draw you back to your keyboard or your writing pad, however you work, every day? And once you've settled on that, set the other ones aside and finish. You sound like, in many ways, you sound like me, a starter and not a finisher. I have ideas I want to start. I get them started, I get in the middle, and I'm like, here's another idea I've got. I should start that one. Can't do it. Have to finish. The reason I have so many books published is because I finish. There's lots of writers who start all kinds of projects, but they'd never finish. So find that one, pick the one. I mean, out of those 4, I'll bet there's one that really has your passion more than the others. I'd urge you to finish it and get it out there, and then see what your priority is for the remaining 3, and maybe by then you'll have 4 or 5 or 6 more. You need to prioritize each time and pick that one that'll keep you coming back to the job every day.
And Jerry, that it's something you hear so frequently that, but I think a lot of people, maybe Muhammad, this is you too. You think you're the only one experiencing that. So I hope that you heard from Jerry that a lot of folks, a lot of writers go through that same thing as well. We've only got time for maybe 1, maybe 2 more, Jerry, before we wrap up here. Let's go to Logan. Logan just asked this question in the chat. Can people with learning disabilities be a successful writer?
That's a good question. That would be difficult. It depends on what the disabilities are. Some people with learning disabilities, they have trouble. They're visual learners instead of auditory learners. I would say, depending on what the disability is, you might need help. You might need somebody to really come alongside and make sure that your manuscript is properly formatted, that it's spelled correctly, that it's edited well. There are people with learning disabilities who have published, so we know it can be done. But without knowing more specifics, I wouldn't want to make promises that couldn't be kept. I love the fact that if you have a disability and you're still interested in writing, I'd love to see you pursue it.
Absolutely. Let's get to one more, maybe one more. I keep saying one more, but let's milk this hour for all it's worth. Yami, you've been with us since the beginning, and I know you've asked this a few times. Glad we're going to get to have Jerry give you some thoughts here. When it comes to world building, characters, and the story, how much development is enough so it doesn't feel confusing or drawn out?
This is, again, where I urge you to trust your gut. If it feels like it's confusing or drawn out, it probably is. And if you're feeling that, your reader will feel it 10 times over. And two, this gets into the issue of whether you're a pantser or a plotter, or a pantser or an outliner. Some people need to outline everything before they start writing. They just can't do it otherwise. They need that safety net. They need to know where they're going. About the other half of novelists are pantsers. We write by the seat of our pants. I'm one of those. Stephen King is one of those. He says, put interesting characters in difficult situations and write to find out what happens. It's a process of discovery. So if you're plotting out your story and you're building your world and you're outlining and you feel like you just want to get writing, you may be a pantser. Just start writing. and let all those issues, all those details about your world and about the backstory, let those come out in the story. Layer them in and have them emerge rather than have them prescribed and outlined and everything in advance. If you start writing and feel like you just can't do it without knowing where you're going, then you might be an outliner. But again, trust your gut. And if it feels drawn out and complicated, it probably is, and force yourself to streamline it.
So many great questions from all over the world tonight, Jerry. And I know that you're careful when people say literally, but we can actually say literally all over the world. We received great questions tonight. Before we wrap up, though, I do want to draw attention one more time to that link I've placed in the chat for everyone, the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. If you enjoyed tonight or today, wherever you happen to be, whatever time it is in your time zone, if you enjoyed this session, it's just a sample of the things that Jerry is doing on a consistent basis for writers all over the world. And so the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild is available to join this week through that link. And we do question and answer sessions like this. Jerry interviews other experts. There's over 70 interviews of him talking to industry experts and other authors. He conducts live workshops where he teaches and trains on a variety of topics. He does live editing sessions. Actually, those are recorded. You edit submissions from guild members, and then we upload those recordings. It's a huge resource, and it's tremendously valuable for aspiring authors. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that opportunity to join the guild through that link. Jerry, anything else from you as we start to wrap up this live session?
Well, thanks for your part in this, David. And it's been fun for me. I hope it's been helpful for everybody. It's just been a great time. So thanks.
It really has been. We'll do this again soon. Thanks, YouTube, for sticking around with us. And hope you'll jump into the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild. Join us, jerrysguild.com/get. We would love to have you become a part of that community. That's all the time we've got. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Jerry, thanks. We'll talk again soon.